All right. Hello again. It's Gareth Wood, GJ Wood, with this week's video. Got something brand new for this week's video, real brand new, penciled in the last week. I'm hoping you like it. Got quite a few short stories that have come up recently because I finished a novel a few weeks back called The Disaffection Agent, which I'm working on the edit through now, which is kind of typing everything up for the first time, putting it all together in one document. The book's finished, but it's about getting it all together. So best thing I like to do is sort of leave something I've finished for a few weeks, work on something else, ideally some short stories, and then get back to the novel at hand. So I think I'm probably about a third of the way through typing up the first edit of The Disaffection Agent, which has given rise to me being able to knock out a few more short stories. So here's one that I penciled in the last week. I hope that you enjoy it. It's called The Prison of McMaster. This wasn't like any other prison in which McMaster had been incarcerated. And he knew prisons, that was for sure. If there was one thing he knew, it was prisons. In his years as a constant recidivist, Hugo McMaster had travelled through one cell after another like a melancholic cancer, wearing his worry in the furrowed trenches of his face. But this prison just wasn't the same as the other prisons. Stood there on the edge of what looked like a ghostly city wrapped in a shroud of chugging smog, McMaster knew only one thing. The door from which he'd emerged was behind him, so there was only one direction to go, which was forward. For a while McMaster saw no other human being, not one at all. The outskirts of the prison were rural in structure, farmland mostly. At least that's what it looked like. Crops bristled in sedentary observance, ploughed soil around them like obliterated coal. Lines of fine string held flowering bulbs together like shackles around the ankles of the prison's newly arrived. Although that was something, McMaster wasn't wearing shackles. No, he wasn't cuffed either, which was strange, but this whole prison seemed strange. In fact, the first inmate that McMaster met was riding a scooter. Must be a trustee, he thought as he flagged the person down. When they removed their helmet, McMaster was shocked to discover it was a woman. A pretty one at that. "Are you a guard?" he asked politely, not wanting to get off on the wrong foot with the screws. "A guard?" she replied, blowing the black arrow of hair from her face. "Yeah, a guard." McMaster was polite, he was respectful. I mean, it wasn't a good idea to roil those in charge. "Well," the woman seemed confused, I suppose I supervise this," and she waved a hand over the expanse of fertile crops. McMaster nodded. "Work detail. I get it. No trouble. I just want to get through this, do my stint and move on, if that's okay." I'm sure," she said. "Anyway, better report to my cell, wherever that is. Just know, if I'm assigned down here, you've got nothing to worry about with me, okay?" "Okay," the woman replied, smiling as she did so, eventually waving as she started her scooter and sped off. Maybe this jail will be better than the last one. McMaster nodded as he walked in the opposite direction, heading towards the monoliths and imposing office blocks of the prison's centre. McMaster marvelled at the size of the place. You couldn't not. As far as prisons went, this was quite the structure. There were mountains in the wider distance, snow-capped arrows aiming up from the horizon. Not getting over those walls, McMaster noted as he tried to familiarise himself with this new unbarred environment. It wasn't long before he encountered the first inmates. On the outskirts of the city blocks, tinkering in the driveways of their cells or simply walking their laps, keeping themselves occupied, McMaster began to pass inmates of all varieties, from those young enough to be in juvenile detention to those so old that it seemed perverse to still have them incarcerated at all. Cruel even. The prison was unisex. McMaster shook his head in staunch disbelief. "Mixed prison, eh? Wow. They're moving on and times have changed. They really have. I can think back a few years ago and you went to prison and the last thing that you'd see in a guy's prison was a woman. Wow. But changes come at a cost." McMaster found himself thinking that the inclusion of women in the prison would cut down on the buggering and shift point rimming, but there were all sorts of other possibilities for violence now. Like, what would happen if you're caught staring at a woman of a heavy hitter, a thug? I mean, man, you'd wind up getting your jaw broken in the commissary. "Got a cigarette?" McMaster turned round to the voice, and stood there in shabby dereliction was an elderly man. The fronts of his shoes flapped as he trampled the leaves. His bare toes looked like tongues lolling from leather mouths. "Sure, Chief," McMaster said, and gave the man 2. "Keep one for later, eh? Might need to trade it in down the line." McMaster continued walking, pleased that some things remained the same in all prisons. Cigarettes were currency, and you had to look after the old-timers. Two rules you got to stick by: cigarettes, currency, old-timers. Keep an eye out for them. They were the credos of the prison system. McMaster opened his cigarettes and halved them, wrapping 10 in torn foil and forcing them down deeply into a rip he had made in the lining of his suit jacket. "Got to make sure these don't get taken by a gang." McMaster couldn't believe his eyes when the first car drove past him. He just couldn't. Used to only seeing traffic from a generous window in the tallest cell he'd ever occupied, McMaster nearly fell to the floor when the engine hummed behind him and the vehicle passed in a spray of gutter dust. "Another guard," he reasoned as he settled back into his stroll. It makes sense. What with the size of the place and the snow-capped mountains and the walls and the centre with the high-rises and the farmland and the scooter and the trustees, it makes sense. People should drive around in cars in a prison. And then he saw the rest. Reaching the peak of a hill after a near breathless climb, McMaster fell back on his hands as the motorway came into view. Intersecting like flattened serpents, the tarmac causeways teemed with cars, trucks and motorcycles. Horns blared in blank annoyance, engines puttered and roared, faces pressed against the windows, mutating their appearance to ghastly caricatures that seemed melted, absolutely melted into inhuman graffiti. Roads. McMaster was amazed. The fucking size of this place. I mean, this has to be the biggest auto shop I have ever seen. He stumbled to his feet and walked down the incline, joining what looked like a path that led along the edge of a road and into a series of underpasses. A gang of youths crowded around the far end of the tunnel as McMaster maintained his cool and moved casually beyond them. "Spare fag," one yelled over. McMaster shrugged his shoulders. You can't avoid some things. "I'm all out, man, down to my last nubs. Maybe you and your boys would have better luck with some of the greenhorns coming off the buses over there." "What's that, mate?" the lad asked, lowering his headphones and jutting out an interested face. "Look," McMaster held up his palms. "I've just left the transport. I'm new in here and I'm trying to get my bearings okay. I know you and your boys could stomp me and who knows, maybe you'll get me down in the bunks. Or the laundry. But if I break out my cigarettes to you right now before I can snag more, then what am I going to use to trade, eh?" The young prisoner looked at his peers, grinned broadly, broke into laughter and almost shook the bleach from his hair. "No worries, mate, I was just asking was all. We'll catch you later, yeah?" McMaster backed away, eyes on the boys at all times, into the fusty light of the exit. Threats are implicit, he worried. I'm due a pounding in the showers. It took McMaster nearly half an hour to believe it was a bar. Sat there on a rendition of a city street, plain as day, a bar. McMaster had heard of more liberal prisons, the white-collar day centres, but even they wouldn't just be able to have a bar sat right there. I mean, everything about this new jail was startling and unlike anything he'd experienced. McMaster's feet hurt and he was thirsty. He was really thirsty. I mean, he'd walked a long way. The gangways in this prison, the hallways, the blocks, they were so big. The idea of a cold beer was almost crippling in its potency. There must be a catch, he mithered, walking past the frontage once, twice, a third time. Has to be some kind of reward for the working groups, road crews maybe, that'll be it. Well, I'm new here and they haven't even put me through induction yet, so what's the worst that I can get? A day or two in solitary? The barman stared at McMaster with obvious curiosity. McMaster stood, mithered, nodded at the effervescent optics behind the barman. What's the deal with the hooch? He whispered. Have you got the moonshine going? Toilet vodka? You got the urinal gin? The barman lowered his newspaper fully. What are they, mate? Artisan brands. I mean, we stock a few craft ales, but I've never heard of urinal gin. McMaster laughed and shook his head. Man, this is brazen. This whole setup is brazen. This is really brazen, this setup you got here. I mean, you should be careful. Having the bottles out like this blatantly. I mean, they toss your cell and chief, you are going to the hole. My cell? The barman closed his paper completely. McMaster surveyed the room. Can't say it's too much like any cell I've been in at the other joints. But yeah, just like the lads trying to get hold of my fags out there in general population, the same rules apply, and man, you're hanging this shit out for anyone to see. A passing guard spies that you're hoarding liquor and that you're selling the stuff. They're going to come right in here and close this down. The barman stood and licked his lips. What do you mean, the guards? You talking about the environmental health, huh? Government inspectors? If that's what they call them in this joint, then I guess. That's what you meant, wasn't it? By urinal gin. Some punter claiming they've had piss in their glass. My friend, McMaster said, some take it straight out the bowl. Plastic bag around the U-bend. I've seen it split in the past, so folks just dunk their cups in and swig what they can. Drink's a drink. Anything to get a liquor buzz after the lights go out. Shit! The barman mithered, squeezed his paper into a battered fan. Oh shit, he said. I need to check the kitchen. Pipes too, make sure everything is cool. Can I get a drop before the screws come by? McMaster said hopefully. Sure. What'll it be? Been some time since I had a beer. The barman poured McMaster a light ale and closed the bar, staring wildly from one end of the street to the next. McMaster licked his lips and whooped. That was good! No idea how you boys managed to brew this up on the inside, but I am grateful for the endeavour, that's for sure. Now what'll it be? Eh? The cost, McMaster said. What do I owe you? Cigarette? Snag? 1 fag? 2? 1.5? Yeah, sure, the barman danced distractedly. I could use something to settle my nerves. McMaster obliged and left. Nothing changes on the inside, he whistled. Cigarettes are currency. The sun was beginning to settle over the invisible walls of the prison. McMaster looked out to the mountainous teeth of the vista and wondered how long it would be until the alarm sounded for lights out. To his surprise, the hallways and landings were still heavily populated with prisoners, guards, motor cars and all manner of animals. The earlier caterwaul had subsided somewhat, but there was still a gradual rattle of activity as McMaster stepped away from the bustling boulevards and into a quieter corridor of ornate buildings and bicycles that ran their delicate bells in passing. Exercise yard, he smirked. Exercise yard. I know it. Staring into the window of a gym at the same time, watching the other prisoners lift and stretch and pedal and skip. Have to keep sharp, got to keep the body fit. He felt his own hard stomach and wiry arms. He was prison tough, like an aging rat who guards his own crusts in the sewer dankness, ready to mix it up with any other yellow-eyed bastard that came a-nibbling. Of all the cells in the world, McMaster marvelled at his unit as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. Looking at the keys in his hand, there was a strand of confusion and awe as he realised that he was the master of his own locks. Guess they don't need to keep you in the cells when they have the walls outside. He thought about the mountain ranges that circled the prison into which he'd emerged that day and shuddered. Have to be one hell of an escapist to make it out of here. McMaster made his bed up and changed into grey clothes. He couldn't be certain about the uniform of the new prison, if there was one. But because so many of the other inmates were dressed inconsistently, he just tried to fit in. I mean, some of them were even dressed in outrageously garish rags, absurd luminous neon that was almost painful to see. But that's what prison can do to a person, McMaster reasoned sadly. Turns a free man into a lunatic. Seen it 1,000,000 times. McMaster pissed into a bucket he'd put next to his bed. Then he heated up a tin of water on a single ring stove he found in a cupboard nearby. He peeked into the other rooms of his block, a seemingly lavish bathroom, a kitchen endowed with shining appliances, even what seemed to be a lounge that contained a television almost as big as the screen they projected movies onto during the Saturday flicks. Must belong to the warden. McMaster wasn't even surprised to see pictures of himself on the walls of the cell by this time. He wasn't sure who the other person was, the woman, but he knew that some slammers, particularly the newer ones, liked the inmates to feel more at ease, more comfortable with their surroundings, real liberal-like. He stared around the roomy cell as if anyone could be comfortable on the inside. I mean, these new prisons, the liberal ideal, the way that they like to ingratiate themselves with you, that the walls become open. These ideas, the way the counsellors had spoken to him in the previous prisons, the way they'd sat him down, the circles, the groups, the meandering, the chatter, the counselling, all of it The psychoanalysis, the words, the therapy. It wasn't like the prisons he was in as a youth, where a cell was a cell and the door was the door and it was locked from the outside, never the inside, and no one had keys. This prison was an extension of the newer prisons, the different prison system, the rehabilitation. It took a while for him to get everything into place. McMaster didn't want to upset the guards by taking things that didn't belong to him, but he couldn't very well defecate on the floor, so he had to snaffle a bucket from one of the cupboards and then find a way to bed down nearby. A lingering whisper in the alleyway of his mind informed him that he could just go and lie in the bed that sat there so plush and so welcoming in the other perfumed cell. But he shook this off. It was pure madness, pure insanity. I mean, invade the guard's office on day one? To Screw's territory? No way. Those bastards would have me down in the hole in no time at all. Hosing me, booting me, water for dinner. I'm no idiot. McMaster just followed the tired routine that had got him this far in life of jails. In his life of jails. He gathered his things together, made a spread in the smallest cell contained within the rooms and pitched down candleside, with the bag of his belongings tied securely to his ankle. He felt alone then, as was often the case during the first night of a new prison, when the faces of the other cell blocks are gaunt phantoms staring hatefully into the ash. That loneliness was natural, and as McMaster had found during his years of rotating incarcerations, the bane of all prisoners who find themselves moving from prison to prison, unit to unit, ward to ward. It was just the same old conveyor, the hamster wheel, the corrugated cog that sends a man from one locked room to the next, leaving him there with the screw-faced sentries of shadow and the cold corporeal concrete that somehow seemed to get into a captive's very bones after a while. McMaster finally took out his notebook and began to scribble down his findings from the day one in the new penitentiary. He started with the cigarette for the old-timer, the refusal of cigarettes for the gang in the tunnelled causeway, and then his discovery of the cell amidst the admittedly plush cell block. Dancing their way through the banality of incarceration blueprints, McMaster found himself wistfully talking about how the sights of this new, quite marvellously decadent prison reminded him of the outside, of freedom. He found himself picturing places that seemed incredibly similar to those he had seen during the day, albeit he had been looking from inside of the prison, as they passed outside of the walls he knew were there, rather than actually experiencing them for himself. That was the key difference. He was looking at them as a prisoner, not looking at them as a free man. The effigy of the pub into which he'd moseyed was perhaps the strangest of all. The way that chap had all set out with pretend optics, taps and even a polished bar, man, it was almost perfect. It was almost real, he wrote. McMaster remembered the taste of the drink and tried to equate it to a comparison elsewhere during his days pre-internment. He couldn't adequately manage it. All he had was a ghost of a taste, a synthetic memory-driven fantasy of something that now seemed so intangible that he may as well pluck a ridiculous analogy out of the air and... McMaster froze as he heard the lock of a nearby cell open. The unmistakable clunk of the barrel as it turned made him drop his chip pen onto the floor and grasp at his bag. McMaster instantly regretted not making a shiv from his toothbrush, or if he'd felt bolder when arriving in the new clink, simply stealing one from the rats contained in the kitchen of the nearby, albeit unseen guards. Footsteps echoed casually down the corridor. They lessened in volume as they seemed to enter one of the distant rooms, and then, as quickly as they had faded, they came again, louder, with more urgency, heading in his very direction. Wow. What was he to do? McMaster quickly untethered himself from his bag and, holding the pen upwards, scurried across the floor towards the crack in the door. I know when I'm getting a beating, man. You have to be prepared. No way about it. Them or you. As the handle turned, McMaster was certain that the face which would appear would be that of the younger inmate to whom he'd refused a cigarette earlier that day. All it takes with these younger lads, all it takes with them, all they need to flip, to riot, to freak out and go nuts, just turn them down for one cigarette. The door began to open and McMaster perched on his haunches, ready to strike. With the bright light of the hallway beyond the figure, all McMaster could make out was two arms outstretched towards him, the figure to whom they belonged, muttering something almost hysterical as it entered the room. No time to wait, McMaster thought as he sprung. I'm a lifer! He drove the pen into the throat of the approaching figure. making sure the impact of his fist carried the makeshift weapon as deep into the flesh as he could manage before they both collapsed. McMaster fell across the figure and was borne bloodily into the irrepressible light of the hallway, still holding his pen. McMaster drove it downwards again and again and again, feeling the taut panic and hot blood of his attacker before he took even a moment to look at their face. Kneeling across their shoulders, wiping what he hoped was only their blood from his face, McMaster panted as he beheld the stab-pocked face of a woman. The woman. The one that had appeared in the photographs in his new cell. The face was perhaps a little older, though hard to tell under the gush of red that spurted liberally from the ruin of the neck, but it was the same woman for sure. The difference, of course, was that it smiled in the photographs, but gasped with agonised wheezes beneath him then. McMaster recoiled backwards. He landed hard against the opposing wall. Shit, not a woman, guard. They'll never let me see daylight again for this. I'll be locked up in here until I die. I'm never getting out. The uniforms that eventually burst into the cells claimed to be police, not guards. McMaster knew riot guards when he saw the man with the tasers at their sides and the batons waving around like horse cocks in mating season. McMaster didn't try and fight. He didn't try to argue or plead his case. A prison kill was a prison kill. I got yours on me, he told them solemnly as they covered the body of the guard with a white sheet which quickly spoiled purple in the half-light of the broken lamps. I had it in my mind it was some of the other convicts, one of the younger gangs even, coming into Russell with the new bloke to kick strips off me, yeah, to take my things. I just went for the figure and I had no idea it was one of you guards. The riot crew stared at McMaster with wild, uncomprehending eyes. They even looked past him at his meagre bunk space in the corner of the room beyond, and then spoke to each other in disbelieving tones. Eventually, deciding to let him in on their findings, one of the uniform screws bent down and told McMaster that the woman he killed was his wife. My wife? McMaster said. I haven't got a wife, man. I've been heading from one prison to another for as long as I can remember. The guard, although he claimed to be a police officer, again, took photograph after photograph down from the wall and showed them to McMaster, pointing him out and the unknown woman together, pointing him out, showing him, look, it's your wife, it's your wife, it's your wife. Some showed them in a golden hue of bars, some at dances, others showed them holding each other on the balconies of sunlit hotels, or beneath the shimmering ghost-happy moon of a coastal night. Yeah, I saw the pictures, McMaster said. I saw them when I got here, yeah, they were on the walls. He was trying to control his annoyance. And I don't appreciate the head games of these new fucking prisons, yeah? I don't appreciate your head games, guards or not. I'm not into it, not one bit. Just give me 4 solid walls, yeah? A flat bed and a high barred window with a little light in the summer. That's all I want. I'll even take whatever work detail I get thrown. But don't try these head games with me. I'm too long in the tooth for this. I just want to do my time and get out. I just want to get home. You are home, one of the guards screamed at him. Suddenly McMaster knew that the man was right in what he was saying. It made sense to him then. Home. He was home. Prison was, and always would be McMaster's home, no matter what it looked like, or who called the shots behind the walls. A new prison, an old prison, it didn't matter. The guard was right. McMaster was as much of his prisons as the walls and all the dinner trays and the overflowing toilets and the yard time. He was the prison. McMaster was the prison. And as they led McMaster down into the outdoor area of the cell block, ready for a swift court date and for more years to be added to his stretch, all McMaster hoped was that the next prison they put him in was more like the ones he'd been used to. The end. Hope you like that. I'll be back with another another story in the next few days, possibly at the weekend. Got a few from the collection of short stories that we've done previously, Screaming Blue City Murder, that I still want to read, and got some new stuff in the pipeline. So I'll be back in touch. Until the next time, take care, look after yourselves, and cheers for watching.